We've all questioned our identity and been unsure of who we are at some point in our lives, right? But imagine waking up every day, not just pretending, but truly believing you're a cat. Not as a fun role play or some quirky furry costume. No, this was the unshakable reality of one man for 13 years. A life where he hunted, spoke, and even loved like a feline. Sounds crazy, right? But it's also one of the most fascinating and bizarre cases in psychiatric history. Stick around, and by the end you'll understand the rare condition that convinced him that he was a cat and how it completely rewired his brain. And we're also going to delve into the Werewolf of Bedburg, Japanese fox spirits, and the lore behind Native American skinwalkers. Our story begins when a 24-year-old man walked into McLean Hospital with a very rare condition called clinical lycanthropy, a delusion where someone believes they've transformed into an animal. This condition has only been documented in a handful of cases worldwide. And in the case of this man, he was convinced that he was a cat trapped in a human body. For over a decade, this belief was his entire world. So how did it all start? Well, according to him, it all began with a secret. His family's cat, Tiffany, apparently told him that he was one of them, a cat. From then on, things only got stranger. He learned to speak their language, meowing and purring to communicate. And his life was no different to that of a cat's. He was hunting small prey, eating raw meat, and believe it or not, he even claimed to have had romantic relationships with cats. And here's the wild part. Despite living this dual life, he kept his job, he had friends, and even his family had no idea. No one knew about his secret feline world. Eventually though, he confided in a psychiatrist. But even then, his conviction in this belief didn't waver. The most astonishing part was his romantic attachment to a tiger at the local zoo named Dolly. He dreamt of freeing her from captivity, but when she was sold to a zoo in Asia, his heartbreak spiraled into deep depression, and he eventually tried to commit suicide. So what's going on here? Well, to understand this, we need to explore clinical lycanthropy. Usually, people think they become wolves, but in rare cases like this, people can believe they're a cat, or a frog, or even a bird. So what's actually happening inside the brain? Well, researchers have found that this condition often induces changes in the brain, in the regions that control how we perceive our bodies, like the parietal and temporal lobes. These areas help us understand where our body ends and the world begins. But when they misfire, the sense of being human can start to blur, just like it did for this man. Now, here's where it gets even wilder. Our brains are incredibly adaptable, something called neuroplasticity. This means that the brain can rewire itself depending on what we do, think, and feel. It does this by forming new neural connections throughout our lifetime. It's pretty cool, right? But in this case, neuroplasticity might have worked against him. Because imagine spending years as a cat, meowing, eating raw meat, thinking cat-like thoughts. The more he did these things, the more his brain probably reinforced the idea that these things were normal. It's like the brain saying, yep, this feels right, and over time it became harder and harder to convince him that he wasn't a cat. And this isn't the only thing going on. In clinical lycanthropy, other mental health conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or deep depression usually occur at the same time. In this man's case, his delusions emerged during a severe depressive episode. Despite years of treatment, including antipsychotics and even electroconvulsive therapy, his belief stayed rock solid. But how does someone's mind go so far off track? Stay with me, because this is where it gets even more fascinating. Next up is how the brain can completely warp our sense of reality. Quick pause here to say thank you for almost 10,000 subscribers, and if you're enjoying this video, please subscribe for more cat science. Well, one possible explanation is dissociation. This is when your brain checks out or disconnects from reality. It's like when you zone out during a boring meeting, but it's much more extreme. According to a 2010 review in the American Journal of Psychiatry, dissociation involves a disconnection between thoughts, identity, consciousness, and memory. For people going through intense emotional trauma or depression, dissociation can make them feel like they've lost a sense of who they are. In this man's case, he might have needed a break from being human, so it created a whole new identity, that of a cat. It's like his mind said, hey, being human is too much right now, so let's try something else. So is this really that unique? As strange as it sounds, cases like this aren't new. In fact, throughout history, there have been reports of similar delusions. During the Middle Ages, Europe was swept up in the werewolf trials. People genuinely believed they had transformed into werewolves. In France, werewolf trials were almost as common as witch trials. Many confessed under torture, convinced they had turned into beasts. And one of the most famous cases is that of Peter Stubb, also known as the Werewolf of Bedburg. In 1589, he was executed after confessing to practicing black magic and turning himself into a ravenous werewolf. His crimes? He killed 14 children and 2 pregnant women. Stubbs's confession, given under torture, included using a magical belt given to him by the devil to shift into werewolf form. But this idea of human to animal transformation isn't confined to Europe. In Japan, we have the myth of the Kitsune, or the fox spirit. These intelligent, shape-shifting creatures can take on human form, usually as a beautiful woman or an elderly man. Kitsune are known for their mischief, often playing pranks on humans, but they're also revered as protectors. And they're linked to the Inari, the Shinto god of rice and fertility. Meanwhile, in Native American folklore, we encounter the Skinwalkers. These are witches or shamans who have the power to transform into animals, usually wolves or coyotes. But unlike the Kitsune, Skinwalkers are seen as malevolent beings, and they use their powers to harm others. The stories of Skinwalkers reflect a darker view of transformation, where the link between animal and human is crossed with evil intent. So why should we care about these stories today? Well, for one thing, they remind us of the delicate balance between reality and delusion, between human and animal. Whether it's a man believing he's a cat, villagers facing werewolves, or fox spirits teaching moral lessons, these stories show us how powerful the mind is at shaping our reality. We've all heard about how identity can be fluid, right? People change their identities all the time, whether you're starting a new career, discovering a new passion, or even transitioning gender identities. But this man took identity fluidity to a whole new level. His story shows us that our sense of self might be way more flexible than we think. If someone can believe that they're a cat for over a decade, it makes you wonder how solid our identity really is. Maybe it's just not as fixed as we'd like to believe. Maybe the real question is, how much of you is solid? And how much could change if your mind believed something entirely different? And that's the story of the man who thought he was a cat. If you like that and want more cat science, check out this video next.